Howdy everyone. Welcome to your mat, wherever you're practicing. Welcome to this time together. If you are here hanging out with me, we are going to be exploring a few different ways or variations on downward facing dog, Adho Mukha Shavasana. I wanted to show you 3 of mine that are my favorite. These are not the only ways to practice down dog. I'll always be upfront with you about that. There are lots of different ways to practice down dog. I'm showing you just 3 for the purpose of this video. One will be block supported. One, you'll see it, trust me, because I know I'm blow up on your computer screens or your televisions. You'll be able to see it at the wall. And then one I'll show you just kind of, I want to say like the standard down dog, with a dropping to the forearms, more dolphin-like, just to kind of give people a backup, okay? So maybe it's more like 3.5. But yeah, so that's what we're going to talk about today. If you check out any of the Pose Playground videos, these are just kind of snippets. They are short on purpose, but also like there's not really any warming up or there's not like a check-in and a shavasana and stuff like that. So if you are here checking this out, it is specifically covering the posture. So if you feel like, oh, I am tight right now, there's no way I'm just going to pop in a down dog, I didn't know that. Well, check out one of the other shorter videos and then come back, or even maybe just a little bit of cat-cow in child's pose could help warm the body enough. All right, so first thing I want to talk about before I go to the mat, whatever, is our hands, forearms, elbows, okay? So I'm going to come to you, because we all know how much I love being on the big screen like this, right? So, hands. Whenever I am using hands to support my body in down dog, which most of the time that's what it is. I don't see a lot of people like fists or anything like that. But what I want to make sure that I do is I am truly using hands. So the claws and the paws thing, the limp sort of, the heels of my hands will hold me up kind of thing. It's not going to work. It is going to come back to bite you. And if you, goodness forbid, have hand or wrist issues already, this is going to make it worse if you aren't mindful and you're not using your hands correctly here. If you start to actually utilize the muscles and the fingers and the hands in postures like down dog, it's going to strengthen your hands, your wrists, your shoulders, so things like down dog become more accessible. I'm not saying they always feel amazing, but over the years, practicing this in a way that is safest for my body has completely changed how down dog feels for me. So hands, whenever you're in down dog, you want your hands, fingers spread a lot. You want your pointer fingers parallel to each other, okay? So it's like this. Now another good way to practice that is to grab one of your blocks. Practice with the blocks, right? So I don't know how much you can see it here because I don't want to drop this block on you. But sometimes I'll put a block in between my hands. I'll show you that here in a little bit. But here, now forearms, okay? We want the forearms, right, or the eyes of the elbows turned in. So this is, they're open. We want them turned in with my hands here, okay? So sometimes if you're kind of a little bit more flexible there, these just kind of open and spread out, right? We want to keep the forearms turned in so the insides of the elbows stay looking at each other. Okay, it took me a really long time to do that. I had to keep reminding myself over and over again. Actually, your, we call eyes of the elbows are pointing up rotate them in. Again, that changed the posture, sensation, the duration I can spend in it, just drastically for me, and I'm not exaggerating. So I just wanted to kind of give you a close-up of what that looks like. Now, if you're not used to being in down dog a lot, especially not in a way that is, you know, most appropriate and safe for your body, that can be a little funky and not feel great in the beginning. So go slow, you know, practice being on all fours and maybe put that block in between, right? And practice bearing weight and just kind of leaning forward and back, and maybe just some cat-cow, okay? So I just want you to always, first and foremost, think about hands, forearms, elbows, okay? Your shoulders will thank you as well. So I just gave you that whole spiel, and I actually want to go to the wall first. So you don't have to do this with me, but I really do encourage you to try it out, mostly because the different sensations, the places where we really are supposed to feel a little more lengthening, stretch, I never really felt them until I practiced this at a wall. Not just a wall. I mean, when I started at the wall, I was like, oh man, that's awesome. Like, wow, that's good. But then now I'm like, if I'm cooking or I'm in the kitchen and I'm cleaning or something, I can just grab onto the counter and do this. And it feels so good. I think you've heard me say it in classes before, sensation over shape. Sensation over shape. Once you start to kind of figure out the sensations of these postures and the way your body can breathe in them, trust and believe, you'll care less about the shapes, okay? So if you have a wall nearby, right, the first thing you're gonna wanna do, right, is you're going to wanna stand looking at the wall. So I'm gonna turn to you for a second. I'm just here, okay? Now when I look at the wall that way, right, my hands are set up exactly like they would be, right, in the prior lecture and nag session I had, okay? So I set my hands up this way. I want my hands at the wall, right, really kind of gently pressing in, and I want my wrists almost across from my armpits to begin, all right? So I have them across my armpits, and I'm kind of leaning into it, and already I'm kind of playing around with, oh, that's what bearing weight down feels like, okay. Then you want to really play around with pressing through the pads of all the fingers. And when I say that, I mean, maybe do knuckles too, but your hands, not your wrists, not the heels of the hands. So when I go there, now again, I make sure, actually, are your hands how you were just blabbing about? Yep. I play around with just kind of, okay, that's what pressing down on them feels like. Now I want to pretend like they're glued to the wall. They're glued now. And I'm going to start to walk my feet back away from the wall. I'm going to keep walking. I'm going to keep walking. And then I get to that place where I'm like, okay, actually I can't walk anymore. When you get to that place, step your hands down, one handprint. You can walk back maybe one step. Now, stay leaning forward, pressing into the pads of the fingers. Good hand alignment. Make sure that those eyes of the elbows are turning to each other. Lift your tailbone. Lift your seat. And then lower your face and your chest between your upper arms. Right? Sorry for just sticking my butt in your face. So we've got this little bit of lean forward. We've got this big stretch happening through the spine, right? All the way from the neck to the, oh man, to the low back. I'm feeling this through the backs of the legs because I'm continuously reminding myself, lift your sits bones. And I can breathe. This feels so good on my shoulders. Maybe I take just a couple breaths. If it ever feels like too much, well, I'll show you what to do. When you're ready, you're going to look back at your fingers and you're going to start to lift, continuing to lean forward and walk back to the wall. You're right back where you started. Drop your hands and shake it out. Now, like I said, I do this at counters now, where I come to the counter and I just keep walking back, it's on like this. See that? Oh my goodness, it feels so good. It feels so good. It didn't in the beginning, but like I said, now that my body's like, hey, give me that down dog stretch, I'm like, I got you. All right, so I'm taking port blocks because over the years, I've learned to love them, and they stick best on mats, okay? They're wonderful support, and they mimic the floor way better than the foam blocks. If you have foam blocks, whatever, use them, they're gonna work. So I wanna place them down on the mat, flat way, and they're the long way, okay? So this is gonna be down dog on the blocks. I guess before I do that, remember what I told you about coming to down dog here? If you've never tried that before, definitely play around with putting that block in between the hands and just kind of explore what that feels like or looks like. Make sure I mention that. All right, so with down dog, okay, oftentimes we start in a table where we're cat-cowing, maybe child's posing, and then it's time to lift the down dog. There are other ways to transition into it or come into it. That's a pretty popular one. So let's say we are down like cat-cow for this example. Now, I've encouraged people before in classes, we'll put the blocks down flatwise. And you're gonna spread your fingers, right? And I'm gonna let the heels of my hands come just at, right, the very edge, see? So I'm not this, I'm like this. Okay. I don't know if this is gonna work, we just gotta try it out. So, I'm gonna secure myself here. I'm gonna tuck my toes. I begin to push these blocks away from me. Now, I am in a lot of ways using palms, right? The insides of my hands more than anything. But I want to remember to press down through the fingers. Then as I'm pushing it away, I'm going to lift my tail, and I'm going to remember how I was at the wall. I was like, no, reach your chest and your head between your upper arms. And then I lift my tail for the sky. Breathe. Always, always lower down slowly. Now, sometimes that helps people with some of the pressure they experience in their fingers. And sometimes we really need that little bit of just like a barrier so that we're not dumping everything into the wrists. It can help. I have people that love it. It's not my favorite, but if I'm aching or I need that extra support, I will bust out the blocks and use it. All right. So then my down doggy, most people have heard the story about it, that in teacher training, we had a doctor come in and he walked around and he was checking out poses and giving pointers and talking about anatomy. And he asked everybody if everyone could just come into, if they wanted to, into their downward facing dog. And I was like, well, yeah. And he was like, I'm gonna go around and I'm just gonna tap on your shoulder if I think you would be a good example. And I was like, okay. So I got he tapped on my shoulder. He was adorable and also just super cool. And I was like, yes. And then he ended up using me as an example of how to like never do a down dog. It was a humbling moment, but it was the crossroads for as far as my down dog goes. That changed the way I was doing it so much, just across the board. But then it just kept improving throughout the years. I'm thankful for getting called out like that. It's not my favorite way, but it was immensely helpful, okay? So if I'm coming into downward facing dog from like a table pose, remember at the wall, I figure out hand placement. Okay, I've got my pointer fingers parallel. Okay, I'm pretty good here. I'm pressing through the fingers. Okay, that's what they feel like. Okay, I could probably bear weight down enough through these hands to figure out how this feels. I'm gonna step my hands one handprint forward. Finger placement stays the same. Then if they aren't already, right, I look back at my knees, and for the most part, they're under my hips. I was talking about table, so that's where they would be, right? Then, again, if they weren't already, tuck the toes, and I'm gonna push the mat away from me, and I'm gonna sink my seat back like I wanna take some child's pose, but I don't. Right now, I am gripping through the pads of my fingers. I'm gonna continue to push the front of the mat away from me, and then I'm gonna pretend like someone's pulling my seat up to the ceiling. As they do, I'm on the balls of my feet, but I am not dropping my heels. That was another thing you let me know. That's one of those yoga myths. You never need to drop your heels, ever. Now I'm gonna make sure my elbows, right, yep. Then I'm gonna lift my tail a little higher. I'm gonna bring my head, right, forward, and by forward I mean towards my knees. I'm gonna make sure my back feels safe, right? And now for me, a lot of the time, taking that bend, oh, it feels so good. Maybe I pedal. When you're in a yoga class and we talk about pedaling, all my clothes are gonna fall off now, awesome. Right? And I keep my seat really high for the sky here. Big breath. Now slowly lower your knees. This is mostly so I can put my clothes back on. Thank you. So a few things I noticed. My hands were sore. My hands actually did not feel great right there. They did not feel great. I want to talk about one more thing, and then I'm going to show you, like today, my shoulders are actually, they're in the game. My hands aren't. That's why I said I want to splash in a little bit of dolphin pose. We're not going to dig deep, but I'll show you something you can do if your hands ain't having it. So when I lift again here, I want to show you something that I did not point out just now. Hand placement good. Knees, tuck, lift. Okay, something I'm doing here that is a no-no. I've got just about everything else set up all right. My shoulders are like in my ears. No. I want to press through my fingers, push the mat away, and I want to reach, right? My shoulders forward, armpits down, and I want to keep my earlobes away from my shoulders so I retain some length in my spine. This is why sometimes you might hear the yoga teachers be like, shake your head out. Can you yes and no? Are you using your ears as a shelf for your shoulders? Yada yada. And now lower down slowly and safely. I'm kneeling for just a moment. So if you've ever been in a yoga class with me when I've taught a dolphin pose, you know we'll probably have a whole video on it. But I just wanted to just show you real quick. Dolphin in a lot of ways is down dog on your forearms. Same way I was nagging about hand placement, finger placement. You want, for dolphin, you want your arms like Sphinx pose. So you want elbow to wrist alignment, and you want these forearms parallel to each other. So it's not just, oh, drop to my elbows, my forearms, ugh. And you want to keep fingers, for the most part, no, we don't have to use them the same way as down dog, but we need to keep fingers spread, and we need to keep the hands at least semi-active. Because again, you will accidentally dump all this weight into the wrists. That's no good for your shoulders, etc., etc. But again, if I'm having a day like I am, and I don't really like how that feels, the same way I would tell you to drop down to your forearms for forearm cat-cow, that's kind of where I would start. If I needed the cat-cow, I'd take it. I'd spread my fingers. I'd make sure, okay, forearms pretty much look like railroad tracks. Now, if your shoulders are super tight, this ain't gonna be the way, all right? So just be mindful of that. But if you just wanna play around with sensation, just like down dog, tuck your toesies, I kind of plant through the fingers, right? And then I'm gonna try to lift my tush, step my feet in a little, and I reach my chest back again, and I'm looking back towards my knees, and I'll tell you, not a fan of any kind of shoulder stand work, but this feels better than down dog tonight. would just kind of lower forward, release the knees. I'd probably take a little a little child's pose here. That's probably how I would counter that. Maybe I'd reach the arms forward. It just kind of depends. So again, different ways to practice down dog. At the wall, countertop, that sort of thing, with blocks. And going forward, if you do try that, you find, oh, the blocks are okay, I actually like that support, but it's just, ow. Well, you can put a little blanket over the blocks too. It'll stick, right? It does work. It's funky at first, but it works. And then also sort of your typical Adho Mukha Shavasana, downward facing dog, where you saw I had my legs bent, I had my heels lifted, there was that sway and pedal, and then I even showed you a little bit of dolphin if you need some relief as far as the hands and wrists go. All right. So thank you for spending a little bit of time on the playground with me. I look forward to the next posture we work on together. Until then, take it easy.